Good morning, everyone, and welcome to PwC's 2026 for Growth, Jobs, and Economic Transformation. At PwC, our purpose is to build trust in society and solve important problems. Again, at PwC, we are very particular about growth. That as we all seek growth, giving focus to how we make things, considering that innovation exists, how we build our roads, dwellings, cities, towns are equally important. How we feed ourselves, how we care in terms of well-being and healthcare, how we move, how we fuel and power, how we govern and serve when it comes to our various communities, including our establishments, and how we fund and ensure when we think very much about our capital items, and ultimately how we communicate and compute, given that we can't help it but collaborate with technology. We believe that all of these are important to growing, all of these are important to improvement, and if you want to put an economic twist to it, all of these are important to development. And maybe finally a political twist, all of these we believe in PwC are important to resetting. This is why we consider this an important event, and we are indeed happy that you were able to join us here, and we also have a number of guests who are online. But before I continue saying anything, I'd just like to say thank you, but I'd like to invite our country's senior partner to the podium to give us what I deem to be a proper welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, help me invite Vish Ashagbo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jijan. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to colleagues and other stakeholders online. And good morning to everybody, basically. Welcome to this event, and thank you, as G said, for being here. My job here is very simple. It's just to let you know what we aim to accomplish today. And for those of you who perhaps are coming to this event for the first time, it's intended to be a dialogue. So we heard the budget that the Honorable Minister read last week on the 13th. And in that budget, he outlined three strategic priorities: consolidating macroeconomic stability, which I'm sure for those of us in the business community is something we are very interested in and would like to see happen; accelerating economic transformation and job creation. Obviously, for a developing country like us, that is something that is pretty essential, and we're very interested in that. And then strengthening security and the social sectors for inclusive growth. So all of these things, I'm sure we'll all agree, are nice to hear. What tends to happen in our environment is that we're good at putting together nice documents, nice plans, nice budgets, but sometimes we run into implementation challenges. So today, what we hope to achieve with your participation is to have a dialogue, as I said before, to hear from each other, but also to interrogate the plans. So in that respect, we are privileged to be joined today by a representative, or the Honorable Minister's representative, in the person of Mr. Samuel Akes, who is the coordinating director at the Ministry of Finance responsible for technical. What does that mean? It basically means that he's the minister's right-hand man. And so he knows everything that anyone needs to know about the budget and the economic plans going forward. So Mr. Akes, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to your participation. So I made reference to implementation. Sometimes when we have these events, we spend a lot of time talking about the policy, the plans, the budgets, which are important by all means. But the implementation is where the rubber meets the road. And we will be joining us. I just spoke to the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority. He says he's nearly here. So again, we'll be privileged to be joined by Mr. Anthony Sapon, a professional colleague and a good friend of ours. So when he comes in, we shall acknowledge him and welcome him. But he will be here to help also to clarify, respond to some of the issues around the tax reforms that are taking place. So between the policymakers and the implementing agencies, hopefully with your participation, we can have a fruitful morning. So Welcome once again. Please feel free, ask your questions, make your comments. We'll put everything together, send it to the ministry, and we can all keep track of how things develop over 2026. So, Jij, thank you very much, and I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vish. Now I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jijeje Fiajo. I'm a partner here at PwC. I focus on tax reporting and compliance. Usually I like to be referred to as Jij, but it sounds so awfully close to Vish, so you can call me Jijeje. So we'll continue. I just have a few announcements now. And I'll start off with a security announcement. I'd like to invite the security coordinator for this hotel, Mr. Hakeem Abubakar. If he's around, please come to the podium. He would like to guide us around this place and also tell us a few things for our safety. And then I come back to you. Oh, please help me welcome him. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are welcome to Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City. My name is Abdul Hakeem Abubakar, security coordinator of this hotel. We are currently on the ground floor of the building, Adlon Ballroom 2 to be precise. And fitted in here, we have firefighting and detection systems, that's smoke detectors and sprinklers, making this place a no smoking area. However, if one wants to smoke, we have designated areas outside the ballroom where we have ashtrays provided. The security team does not intend to have any drill today. However, in case of any fire emergency, our team of fire wardens will be here to assist you to the nearest assembly point, which is opposite the ballroom drop-off area. We have our washrooms located at the extreme right of the foyer, and also we have West African Rescue Association on call. They are paramedics in case of any medical emergency. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hakeem Abubakar, for those announcements. I just want to quickly announce that we are online. We have guests online joining us at PwC Africa YouTube channel, PwC Ghana LinkedIn page, PwC Ghana on Facebook. We are also live on Joy News TV and all Joy Socials, Joy News Social, and Graphic Online TV. Our live audience, we are happy to have you join us as well. One other announcement about about questions. We will display a QR code intermittently within the sessions. Please do scan them. I dare say that is the only opportunity you have to use your phone. Otherwise, we believe that you'll be focusing on the conversations that will be going on. So yes, you can always scan the QR codes, and that goes to our online guests as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm not sure which of the cameras are looking at me, but I'd like to say to our online guests that we here are living in the Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City. I'm not sure what that means, but I would hope that living will mean staying here and sleeping here perhaps, but we are here live and we are coordinating affairs from here. I believe that I've said enough, and this is it's time now perhaps to understand our economy. Perhaps again to understand where we are presently and the outlook. So I'd like to invite Vish back again. Vish is going to set the tone for our economic conversation, and then we are going to have a presentation by Fitch about the economy. It gives us a very good perspective, perhaps an outside-in perspective to it. So ladies and gentlemen, help me again welcome Vish, this time to talk about the economy.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, even though Gigi referred to a presentation, literally, I just have one slide because I think the more important discussion is what we'll hear from Fitch. And like Gigi said, what we aim to do this morning is to understand from, or looking at Ghana from an external perspective and from other stakeholders, what do they see? So my presentation is very simple. It's basically the slide that is on the screen. And what this seeks to accomplish is for those of us who perhaps have not had the chance to go into the details of what was in the budget, this is just a snapshot of the key macroeconomic indicators that Honorable Minister presented last Thursday. So we are starting with 2024 outturn, just as a comparative. So some of the key indicators, what we were able to achieve as a country in terms of our GDP growth rates. We didn't do too badly in 2024, in actual fact, 5.7%. And if I jump straight ahead to the last but one column, which shows the September outturn for 2026, 6.3%. But going forward, I think we're projecting just about 5% GDP growth rate per annum, which is not bad in actual fact. It looks lower than what we've achieved previously. But if you can have a sustained 5% growth per annum, it's actually a good indicator. So some of the other indicators that we like to measure as an indication of the strength of our economy are also there. We see the primary balance, which has been problematic in the past, obviously because we were trying to manage expenditure against revenue shortfalls, etc. But that has turned positive in the last year. And so again, some good indicators appearing on that front. And that then flows into the fiscal deficit itself, which was roughly about 8% for 2024, but is projected to close 2026, or certainly at the end of September, was just below 2%. And the budget for, that's for 2025, but the budget for 2026 is aimed to be just over 2%. And if you look at the medium-term projections, it's hovering around the 2% mark or so, which for a developing economy like ours, is not bad. I should actually say that it would be good if we can actually accomplish that in conjunction with 5% year-on-year real GDP growth. So the indicators tell a good story. And then if you go down to looking at the reserves, you see quite a good performance there as well. Historically, we have been challenged with the reserves, but currently we're sitting quite well above the 3 months of import cover mark. So this is just to set the scene. Now, if I were to summarize this slide, I would just say that we've come from a difficult recent past. The numbers here are 2024, but as most business people in the room or online will know, the years before 2024 were more difficult than even 2024 shows. But numbers tell us that 2025 has seen significant improvement, and the budget tells us that 2026 will see further consolidation. And if you go back to the comment I made at the beginning, consolidating the macro stability is what is being reflected in the budget that we see. So I'll pause there because, as I said in my welcome remarks, this is the budget, this is the plan, this is what we aim to achieve. Now, what becomes important is what are the assumptions in here, what are the risks in here, and what are the things we must do from an implementation point of view in order to realize or to deliver this plan. And that's where we want to focus the discussion this morning. Before I hand the mic over to Fitch, and again, Fitch is going to tell us what they see from afar and what they are picking up from their research so that it can inform what we see locally. Because oftentimes, business folks look to partnerships, look to foreign direct investment, and such like. So it's important for us to understand what the external stakeholder community is also seeing and what they are thinking and what their view of our performance and of our budget is. So I'll hand over to Fitch in the next minute or so, but before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge the Acting Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Mr. Anthony Sapong. Tony, thanks for joining us. As I said, Tony is a good colleague, a professional colleague, and a good friend of ours. And Tony, thanks for taking the time to be with us. So Commissioner General will be with us through the morning. He will listen in. His primary role for today is to help to respond, clarify to some of the questions that we all have around the VAT and other tax reforms, and maybe some other implementation matters that businesses may be interested in. So with those few words, I don't know if we can go to Fitch. Is Fitch ready for us? Okay, so if we can, great. So lady and gents, I hope you can hear me. Does the sound clear? Okay.
I can hear you loud and clear.
I'll just hand over directly to you if you don't mind, so that you can give us your presentation. And then I understand you'll be with us through the event so that you'll also be able to take some questions and respond to the audience as is necessary. So thank you very much. Let's hear from Fitch.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can I just confirm that you can hear me okay and that the sound quality is all right before I get started? Okay, I trust everyone can hear me okay. I hope everyone can also see the slides in the room. I'm currently just seeing the PwC logo in the room, so I'm not sure if that's working.
Yeah, Mike, we can hear you. Kindly proceed.
Great. Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Kruniger. I'm an associate director in BMI's country risk department at Fitch Solutions, focusing specifically on West African economies, including Ghana, of course. So let me start by saying thank you very much to PwC for having me today. I'm very excited to share BMI's views on the Ghanaian economy to PwC and other stakeholders. So if we move to the next slide, just a quick disclaimer from us. So yeah, this presentation today is done by BMI. We are a Fitch Solutions company, but we're not Fitch Ratings. So this is not a comment on Fitch Ratings, credit ratings. So any comments or data included in this presentation today are completely solely derived from BMI and independent sources. Fitch Ratings analysts do not share data or information with BMI. So if we move to the next slide, please, Cornelia. Yeah, just really briefly the content. So what I'm going to do today is give a 15-minute overview of the outlook for the Ghanaian economy, specifically in 2026. So touch on some important topics. Of course, GDP growth. We're going to look at inflation, monetary policy. Of course, I'll touch on fiscal dynamics and external stability as well. Questions I think we're doing after the Minister of Finance or the Ministry of Finance has spoken. So we'll do that a little bit later, I believe. So yes, let's kick off with Ghana's fiscal outlook. So as everyone on the call is of course aware, just last week the finance minister presented the 2026 budget, and the latest data from the Ministry of Finance confirms that fiscal consolidation remains firmly on track. The improvements we're seeing in the 2025 fiscal data is largely driven by a sharp moderation in government spending, particularly in debt servicing and public investment. On the revenue side, performance has been pretty solid as well. So domestic tax receipts were only slightly below expectations in the first 3 quarters of 2025, and that is mainly due to softer personal income tax and VAT collections. However, other direct taxes, which includes mineral royalties, outperformed significantly, I think coming in roughly 16% above target, almost certainly supported by the record high global gold prices we're seeing this year. So with revenues holding up and spending tightening, we expect the budget deficit to narrow substantially from 7.9% of GDP in 2024 to just 1.8% in 2025. And you can see that on the chart on the left here. What you can also see on this chart is that in 2026, so next year, we forecast that the deficit remains small, but will widen a little bit to 2.8% of GDP. And there are really 2 main reasons for this widening, right? The first one is the changes to the VAT regime that are detailed in the new budget. So the scrapping of the COVID-19 levy, along with a broadly lower effective VAT rate down from 21.9% to 20%, will somewhat constrain revenue intakes. And then second, we're going to see higher infrastructure spending next year. So the government's flagship Big Push infrastructure program will proceed as detailed in the budget and will drive recovery in capital expenditure next year, resulting in a slightly larger deficit. So if we then quickly look at the medium term, so the years beyond 2026, we believe that the deficit is going to remain largely contained, although we do expect a widening in 2028 as the general election is likely to result in some level of fiscal slippage, which is often the case in Ghana. So overall, the tax measures outlined in the new in the 2026 budget, I think, were largely priced in by external investors. And I think this is clearly reflected in the chart on the right here, where you can see that Eurobond yields have remained quite close to that 8% level since the budget. So this stability, I think, suggests that markets are broadly aligned with the government's fiscal strategy, and that the budget contained no major surprises that would, could have prompted a reassessment of risk. So in other words, investors appear comfortable with the fiscal trajectory, and the absence of volatility points to a broadly positive reception of the 2026 budget from international markets. So if we move to the next slide, please. So thanks to the VAT relaxations and a rebound in capital spending, we see the 2026 budget as broadly supportive of growth. And this aligns with our forecast that Ghana's real GDP growth will nudge up from an already pretty strong 5.8% in 2025 to 5.9% in 2026. And you can see that on the chart on the left here. So continued strong economic growth next year will be driven by private consumption and a continued expansion in fixed investment, which is still recovering from the sharp contraction it saw in 2023. And then in the medium term, so again, looking a little bit beyond 2026, growth is set to remain pretty healthy around the 5% mark, supported by continuous expansions in domestic demand. Importantly, Ghana's current growth projections aren't just strong by its own historical standards. It also places Ghana among the fastest growing economies globally. And you can see that clearly on the chart on the right here. So Ghana is going to outpace a lot of other emerging markets next year, including, as you can see here, mainland China, Indonesia, Kenya as well. So overall, I think the growth story for Ghana is going to be one of outperformance. So if we move to the next slide, please, Cornelia. Of course, this all begs the question what the key drivers are going to be that will keep economic growth strong in Ghana in 2026. And the first one, and potentially the most important one to mention here, is much lower inflation than we have seen in recent years. So as the chart on the left shows, inflation has already fallen pretty markedly in recent months and is now comfortably within the central bank's 6 to 10% target range. And on the right, you can see that all major components of Ghana CPI are trending lower, with transport costs even slipping into deflation territory, really due to weaker global oil prices on a year-on-year basis. So if we then look at the left again, looking specifically at the red line here, we project inflation to remain much lower in 2026 than we've seen in previous years. Yes, global food prices such as rice and wheat will rise somewhat next year and add a little bit of upward pressure to Ghanaian inflation, but overall, price pressure should stay low by recent standards, which will ease pressure on household budgets and support commercial activity and support strong consumer spending. If we move to the next slide, you can see the main reason, however, why we think inflation will remain low is a more stable exchange rate over the coming quarters. So as I'm sure everyone in the room and online will know, the Ghanaian cedi has been through somewhat of a roller coaster over the past couple of years. You can see that clearly on the left here. So heavy sell-offs in 2022 and 2024 made it amongst the worst performing currencies globally, but this has been reversed in 2025. So in the year to date, so since the start of the year, the CD has gained about, I believe, 35% against the US dollar now, making it the second best performing currency worldwide, only behind the Russian ruble. Now, the rapid rise in global gold prices is the main driver behind this strength. As you can see on the chart on the right, global gold prices have surged by roughly 50% since the start of the year, reflecting really a confluence of factors, including expectations of US Fed rate cuts, policy uncertainty in the US caused by President Trump's unconventional rhetoric, ongoing geopolitical tensions as well, specifically in Ukraine and the Middle East, and central banks ramping up gold purchases. So as gold remains Ghana's most valuable export, these record high prices have brought in strong dollar inflows from export receipts. And as you can see on the right here, reserves, international reserves, have climbed in tandem with gold prices to now cover about 5 months of imports, giving the Bank of Ghana plenty of firepower, really, to intervene in the forex and interbank markets. At BMI, our commodities team expects gold prices to remain high over the coming quarters, so through 2026, as much of the dynamics I just highlighted will persist. So this will see Ghana's international reserves rise further next year and limit sharp depreciation risks. So as you can see from the chart on the left again here, we project the CD to return to a more conventional depreciation trend of roughly 8% through next year. And because Ghana relies or still relies very heavily on imported consumer goods, which include cars, food, pharmaceuticals, plastics, a more stable currency will help keep imported price pressures contained through 2026. So if we move to the next slide, please. Fixed investment, we believe, is also going to be a key driver of economic growth next year. There are really two key reasons behind this. The first one here is we expect continued monetary easing by the Bank of Ghana to encourage private sector credit uptake, which should translate into higher corporate capex. So as shown on a chart on the left here, the central bank raised its policy rate to a very restrictive 30% back in 2023. Rates have remained elevated since, but the Bank of Ghana launched a pretty decisive easing cycle this summer, cutting by 650 basis points so far, making it the fastest monetary easing cycle globally this year. So with inflation back within the central bank's target range, as we just saw, as well as robust FX inflows and a relatively stable currency, we believe the BOG, the Bank of Ghana, will continue to cut and bring the benchmark rate down to 16.50% by the end of 2026. So while monetary transmission, of course, takes time, we anticipate a clear pickup in private sector credit demand over the coming quarters and months after, I believe, around 3 years of weakness. So this should drive up investment by private businesses in 2026. Second reason we expect strong growth in fixed investment is a robust pipeline of public construction projects. So these include Ghana's first 6-lane expressway linking Accra and Kumasi, rural electricity grid extensions, and further road upgrades, all mentioned in the 2026 budget. So together, these projects will drive construction activity and support fixed investment throughout next year. So if we move to the next slide, to Ghana's external sector, I think the picture here is a little bit less upbeat. So on the left here, you can see that export growth has been exceptionally strong this year, thanks to those elevated global gold prices, as well as high cocoa prices. But those prices have largely reached a ceiling at this point. So year-on-year export growth is starting to slow somewhat. And this moderation is going to spill into 2026. Partly because of tough year-on-year base effects, right? At the same time, imports are picking up, and we expect import growth to outpace exports next year, driven by that solid consumer demand we just saw and robust construction activity, which will increase demand for foreign goods. So the result of this is going to be a smaller trade surplus, and you can see that on the chart on the right here. Now, does a smaller trade surplus mean external pressures for Ghana? No, not really. The current account will remain comfortably in surplus. You can see that as well here from the yellow line or the orange line. Sure, export growth will moderate, but gold prices are going to remain much higher than by historical standards, providing still upside support. On top of that, Ghana has strong external buffers. Reserves now cover about 5 months of imports, which helps safeguard the balance of payments position. And while the IMF program is going to wrap up in the middle of 2026, Ghana will still receive disbursements in H1. So adding another layer of stability. So if we move to the next slide, moving on to the risks, really. I'm not seeing the next slide, Cornelia. There we go. Sorry, the slide before that. Yeah, there we go. So far, the outlook we've seen is broadly positive. A contained budget deficit. We're going to see strong growth ahead, strong economic growth. Inflation is much lower than it has been in recent years. We're seeing falling interest rates and overall external stability. But before we move on to the next speaker, I do want to flag a couple of important risks here. The first risk is higher inflation and higher interest rates in the U.S. Our base case assumes inflation in the U.S. stays contained, allowing the Federal Reserve to keep cutting rates through 2026. But if tariffs hit inflation harder than we currently expect, the U.S. Fed might reverse course and hike rates to anchor inflation expectations and maintain policy credibility. If that happens, this is not a core view, right? But if this happens, gold prices would come under pressure. Why rising U.S. rates makes interest-bearing assets like bonds more attractive, reducing demand for gold. For Ghana, that would mean a return to current account deficits. It would mean weaker reserves, and it would mean pressure on the cedi. So inflation would then rise again, potentially forcing the Bank of Ghana to pause its easing cycle or even to hike rates again. So as I mentioned, not our core view, but a key risk to bear in mind for 2026. The second and the last risk I want to mention on the next slide has to do with the Sahel and the Islamist insurgency over there. So far, Ghana has been relatively shielded from a violent spillover compared to other coastal West African states, specifically Benin, for example. And this resilience is really partly due to Ghana's northern terrain, which is much less forested than, for example, Benin or Cote d'Ivoire, making it harder for militants from the Sahel to hide, really. And also because state control in northern Ghana is just stronger than in many neighboring countries. However, Islamist groups are gaining ground, right, in the Sahel, specifically in Mali right now, and the risks for Ghana are therefore rising. Our base case is that Ghana remains largely insulated from major attacks, but if militants were to cross into northern Ghana, the government would need to ramp up military spending, which, as you can see on the chart on the right here, is currently amongst the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa. So any sort of direct impact from a potential incursion from the Sahel would be quite small because the North contributes relatively little to headline GDP. However, higher defense spending would take away resources from other priorities, right? Like the investment projects we discussed earlier. So should we see a militant spillover, again, not a core view, but should we see this would create fiscal dilemmas for the government. So I think this wraps up my bit of today's webinar, today's session. So I believe we're going to do Q&A a little bit later. So I assume we're moving on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much. That was Mike Kruniger from Fish Solutions. And I think that's a very good presentation. I was writing notes to actually find out, is it all good news? I think it's predominantly good news. And that goes back to the point that Vish was making. Shall we focus on implementation? The plan appears to be good. We'll just move on right along. I'm going to invite my colleague, Abeku Jan Kwansa, who is going to do a presentation on the money. Where are we going to get the money? And particularly, he's going to give a lot of focus to domestic revenue mobilization, and in particular, taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, Abeku Jan Kwansa.
So, good morning, everyone. I would stand on the existing protocols and not re-establish any new ones. So, going straight into the tax presentation and riding on the back of what Vish said, our focus will be on implementation. So, as such, we have just a 2-point agenda. The first is to set the context of the national budget, and then the second is just on the tax measures. And the reason is simple. Last week, Thursday, the minister told us his policies. How will those policies be carried out? How will it be when GRA comes to visit you 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Would you be prepared? So moving straight into the budget. The budget is nothing but simply revenue and grants less expenditure. So going into 2026, this is what the budget is telling us. We as a people expect to spend a little over 300 billion cedis. We expect that to finance that 300 billion cedis, about 270 will come in by way of revenues and grants, and then we'll run a deficit of about 35 billion. How does this compare to the previous year? So from the previous year, we are projecting that by the close of the year, we would have spent about 250 billion cedis. We would have raised revenues and grants of almost 230 billion cedis. And we expect to have added about 25 billion cedis to our debt stock. Now let's see what is happening between this year and next year. On the deficit side, would expect that deficit would move from 25 to 35. Expenditure would move from 250 to about 300 billion. And then revenue would move from about 230 to 270 billion. The natural question that comes is that we have celebrated the various tax policy measures. And of course, typically when people celebrate and it's not the government celebrating, then it's because we are expecting the tax burden to go down. So if that is the expectation, why are we moving from 230 to 270? Clearly, the budget gives a signal. Government is expecting a lot more enforcement measures, expanding the tax base. Whenever we talk about expanding the tax base, our mind should begin going somewhere. And in line with what Vish said, we will be showing you a couple of things that we need to begin paying attention to on the implementation side. Usually at PwC, we believe that our purpose is to solve those important problems in society. So let's break this thing down to the individual level. So at the individual level, the budget translates into government spending almost 9,000 cedis on each of us per year, 9,000 cedis. It translates into we giving government almost 8,000 cedis per year. And then we're going to be owing about 1,000 cedis. So for each of us in this room, if we pay for ourselves, pay for our children, and pay for the 35 billion people, then we have no debt of the 35 billion to be talking about. So this should bring the numbers home to us. How much is government spending on us per individual? How much are we contributing per individual? And how much should we go onto the market to borrow? Having set this context, having recognized that we are celebrating the VAT reforms and all the other reforms, but then, as we showed us, the growth in the economy is operating around 5%. But look at the revenue line, we are expecting to grow revenue by almost 18%. It means that there are certain hidden things that we need to be looking at and to get prepared accordingly. Having said that, let's deep dive into the tax policy measures. For those of you who have already seen the at the glance that we published over the weekend, if you take the counts, you will see that we have almost 20 tax measures there, but we're not going to have a 20-point conversation here. We're going to break this down into about 5 broad areas as business persons we need to focus on. The first thing that we need to note, and the first thing that a lot of persons have already celebrated, is the issue about the VAT bill. And based on publicly available information, we understand that that bill is already in Parliament. So if you have a parliamentarian's number, call them, verify, get a copy, and make an input, because we ought to build this country together. Let's not wait for those bills to be passed, and then now we complain that certain things did not go the way we expect. Other than the VAT bill, the 2026 budget has signaled that the entire tax structure of Ghana will change. And by this, what do we mean? We are expecting that in 2026, work will start on we getting what for now we can even call a new income tax law for implementation in 2027. We are expecting that the entire customs regime should change, and we are expecting that the entire excise regime should change. One of the things government did, which was good, was to start carrying us on right from the beginning of the year on the major VAT policy changes. We hope that the same thing will be done for the income tax, for customs, and then for excise. So the very first takeaway is not just that we're going to have a VAT bill, but we are expecting 3 new major laws, and that should entirely reform our tax system in Ghana. The second thing, which from a lot of public commentary we seem to have missed, is that there is something on agribusiness. So government says that I am going to incentivize the agribusiness sector, provide tax incentives, and provide rebates. In 2022, as a people, we decided to say that we've given out too much exemptions. So let's introduce what is called the Tax Exemptions Act to set the borders on how we would operate exemptions in this country. So we will be waiting to see and hope that whatever government does on this agribusiness would conform to the exemptions bill, or the Exemptions Act, sorry, as we currently have it. So that 5 years down the line, we as a people do not come back to complain that we are giving up too many exemptions. One of the areas that have also been missing in public commentary, which we ought to take attention on, is a significant change that we are expecting in the domain of taxing non-residents. So government just said, oh, in 2026, we would be subjecting non-residents with significant economic presence and digital presence in Ghana. What we were not aware of, or what if you don't have a tax lens, you would see, is that essentially what government is seeking to do is to modify the rules around, for now I would say, permanent establishment. So basically, you stay in Ghana, you buy from a non-resident person, the person sends you the goods, you go to the port, you clear the stuff, you don't have any consequence on withholding tax. If government begins to say, I want to change the rules to tax people with significant economic and digital presence, it means that the rules that we are currently seeing may change. So your obligations towards your counterparties across the border may change, the tax implications may change, and usually whenever there is a new tax, we do not usually go around the line of it's indirect, it's direct. No, it's about who is more powerful on the negotiating table. So I had a client who said, oh, government has brought this tax, not a problem, I'll just pass it on, because they realized that they were powerful on those negotiating table. So please, let's take note of this. As soon as the rule changes, your obligations may change, whether on the withholding tax side, or is government seeking to do a digital tax system? We don't know, and we just need to be monitoring. The third thing that we are expecting is that one of the things that has also been missing is the issue of tax stamp on edible oils. So let me take you back into history. In 2013, we as a country decided to say that there were too much smuggling going on excisable products. So right on your table, you see those bottles of water. Take it, look on the cork. You will see some papers stuck there on the cover that you have there. Those are excise tax stamps. So when we passed the law in 2013, we went forth and back, and finally in 2018, we decided to implement it. Fast forward, we decided to say, oh, our textile markets were being flooded, so we're going to bring a tax stamp. We amended the law. We struggled somewhere in 2021, 2022. We are trying to see whether we're going to do something. And now there is edible oils tax stamp. Why should this matter to you? When we started a tax stamp on this product a few years ago, the GRA went on an enforcement action, and they went to certain hotels like this. Of course, I don't remember whether this hotel was part. And they went to their restaurant and stuff and saw that they had products that did not have those tax stamps. And they seized those products. You don't want to be subject to that. And therefore, if you are within the edible oil field, start monitoring so that you don't get yourself into trouble. The last but one thing that we're going to be talking about is the issue of an airport development fee. Once again, it's been missing in the public commentary. So government says, I need a new airport. I need to link Terminal 2 to Terminal 3, Akotoka. So I want to introduce a new airport development fee. All right, let's go back into history. Do we have an airport tax in Ghana? Yes, we do. For some of you, you may be fortunate whenever you travel, you don't buy your own plane ticket. Your organization buys it, so you don't look at the breakdown of the tax component. When you look at the breakdown of your taxes on your ticket, you will see an airport fee there. The last time that we revised our fee in Ghana was about 2011, thereabout. So it's been about 14 years, 13 years. Our view is that if government thinks that there is a need now to have our airport development fee, instead of introducing a fee or even introducing a new tax line, our recommendation, subject to international rules and international agreements, would be that modify that airport tax and capture it there. What happens is that local people traveling will pay, cross-border people would also pay to reduce the burden on everyone. So I'm sure you've seen that there's a missing piece that we have projected there. And I'm sure if I give you the crystal ball, you'll know what that missing piece is. And that is where I want us to land. And when we land there, we are not going to give you answers as such. We're going to give you pointers. Unfortunately, we have our Commissioner General in our midst. He is not required really to answer the questions unless he so chooses. But it's for all of us to begin a participatory approach to ensure that whatever laws is finally brought up works for all of us. So in that bit, we are now going to move on to talk about the VAT changes and the things that have been missing in the public commentary. So the first thing that we want to talk about is that anytime you talk about VAT, we should think about these four broad areas. And if anything happens to at least two of those areas, one can actually say that the change is major. And what are those four broad areas? The first area that we should always be thinking about is that what sort of product is subject to VAT and what sort of product is not subject to VAT. For those of you who schooled in, say, schools in Ghana, secondary schools, universities, you look on your bill, you do not see VAT because we've taken a policy decision not to apply VAT on education, all right? The next thing that you need to be asking yourself is that who should be charging that VAT? So you go to the mall or you go to the petrol station and you buy a gum. When they print out your till for you, you will see a VAT there. But if you decide not to buy it there and you go to the streets, you do not see VAT being charged to you on the street. There is a reason. So we look at who should be in. The next thing that you need to be looking at is that under what circumstances should you even charge VAT and at what rate? So if you deal with a non-resident person, at what rate do you charge them? Typically we do 0. And this area has been a contentious area, and some very prominent companies in Ghana have had to go to court because of the complexities of those rules, which we had never had until the last VAT law came into being. And then the last area that one is to be looking at is the VAT accounting. That is where the revenue will come to look at. So to repeat, anytime you have a VAT conversation, let's look at these four broad areas. What product are you looking at? Who should be registering for the VAT? What place are you looking at and at what rate? And then lastly, how do you account for it? So what we're going to break down now for you to begin averting your mind and be focusing on the practice are as follows. So the first is so help me from the back, please. All right, so the first, can you help me from the back? All right, so as we do the tech, let me just speak through them. So the first is the issue on who should be registered. So we all know that the government of Ghana, all right, so thank you. So now let me do the project and I'll come back to who should be registered. Now, so far in the public commentary based on the budget, we haven't seen comments on which products will be subject to VAT or not. And if government says, I am going to expand the tax base, our mind should begin checking. Are my products that were exempt now going to be subject to VAT or vice versa? Each of it has its own consequences. So please, let's pay particular attention to that. The second one is the issue on registration. We have a history, or we had a history in this country. We are one of about 5 countries in the world that have attempted to introduce VAT, and on first attempt, that VAT failed. So we have a peculiar area as far as VAT implementation is concerned in the world. One of the things that had always bothered minds of people is that who would be within that regime and who would not be within that regime. So as far back as in 2015, we decided to tell ourselves that in general, if you do not make supplies exceeding 200,000 cedis in a year, you would not be required to subject yourself to VAT. Over time now, that 200,000 in current terms, using a 50-week year, translates into 800 Ghana cedis a day. So if you don't sell more than 800 Ghana cedis a day, then on average, you shouldn't be registering for VAT. Government of Ghana is saying that I'm going to expand this up to 750,000 cedis. And the 750,000 cedis, if you use a 50-week, 5 working day, that translates into 3,000 cedis. So if you go and buy wache, and the woman that dishes out the wache has a huge pile there with some under the table, and you buy your wache, you think that what she's selling is exceeding 3,000 cedis, then she should probably be giving you a VAT invoice, maybe. So we'll see whether that happens. Now, that is where government of Ghana is actually taking this to, up to 750,000. But one of the things that you actually note is that when you go back into history, when we started introducing VAT, we separated the rules for goods and we separated the rules for services. We only hope that we wouldn't go back to that regime, because if I go and fix my car, is that a goods transactions or a services transaction? The revenue has practice note on this and it's quite complicated. Our hope and our dream is that we would not draw those demarcations, because the initial laws had those demarcations. We progressed and say it doesn't matter whether you are a barber or you sell bottles of water. As long as you are within that area and you have a certain threshold, you should charge or you should not charge. The other thing that we need to know as far as registration is concerned is to ensure that those demarcations are not there. Next is the issue about rates. If you look at the March budget that was presented, government talked about sort of effectively removing the VAT flat rate scheme. In the media review, that statement was repeated. In the November presentation, government had gone silent on the VAT flat rate scheme. What does that actually mean? And for those of you here, I know that whatever be the threshold, you would exceed the threshold for registration and you may not fall within the VAT flat rate. But the truth of the matter is that if you comply and others do not comply, it affects tax morale, and over time, those who are complying we'll begin thinking I shouldn't comply. Since the budget was presented last week, Thursday, Guta in particular, those in our markets, have started complaining. And I'm sure for those of you who listened to the news this morning, they were already complaining again. That are you saying they should start charging 20%? Our hope and our dream and our wish is that government at least listens to these people and ensure that if you are between 750 and a million, at least to start with, you allow them to operate their flat rate. We can put that flat rate at 5% because in any case, if you look at the history of flat rate, that is a very reasonable rate, and then we leave it there. And as we get them into the net, and we are saying that you are selling over 1 million, why don't you want to operate the standard rate? So let's avoid a case whereby they will all begin to push back, and let's not forget the politician responds to numbers, and the minute they begin pushing back and you don't respond, they may then change everything that we currently have. So let's pay attention to them. The next thing that we want to talk about is the VAT accounting. And this may not appear too happy to maybe those that this may affect, but it is very important looking at our experience in this area. In this particular area, three things that we want to talk about are as follows. One, in 1998, when we started VAT in Ghana, we started at 10%. In 2000, we found the need to add education to it. The education was a component of VAT. So in 2001, 2002, 2003, when you went to buy things, the rate had only moved from 10 to 12.5, just one line. Then in 2003, 2004, we decided to tell ourselves we are bringing in the health levy. And that was where the breakup started. But fast forward, in 2017, we passed an earmarking levy to basically say that whether you are earmarked or not, we can use a law at the back end to ensure that the entities that require the money will not get the money. Now, the average Ghanaian knows that the effective standard VAT is 21.9. So whether you call it VAT plus COVID plus health plus education, they know it is 21.9. Is it about time that we make our lives easier to just simply say that the standard VAT rate is 20%? Yes, there could be the political stuff in it, but the truth is that the average Ghanaian now knows. So please let us take note of that. The next thing is about the issue of recognizance. For those of you who have been through audit, you know what you face when the GRA comes and rejects your VAT relief purchase orders. So our plea with government on implementation is for us to apply the laws as it is, allow the guys to enjoy it, but not use the VRPUs. So charge them and let those mining companies go and deal with GRA to get their refund, other than spreading the VRPU risks. And the last thing that we'll talk about is on general things, and then the presentation will come to a close. We've had a conversation around the import declaration forms. Indeed, it is sad. However, I have witnessed instances where people have actually gone to certain banks, and the banks tell them that whatever you want to send out, you need to fill out an import declaration form. So people ended up filling import declaration form for services. Services would never come through the port. So if you filled an import declaration form for a service and government is doing the accounting, they would not account it through the port. So maybe we all need to educate ourselves properly and then know when to fill an import declaration form for the purpose of transfer. The next thing that we want to just talk about is the issue of ITAP. We are glad to know that government is now saying, I would do it from 2026. We'll clap for them, but we'll also say that it's been too long. Passing a law in 2020 to implement in 2026 is difficult to appreciate, but we'll keep appreciating it anyway. Then the last bit that we'll talk about is the issue of tax cooperation. So as you comply, just take note that the GRA is exchanging information, and you just want to ensure that you comply in all areas. So we hope that this sets the ground for us all to have an insightful, practical conversations on the policy measures that were presented. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Abeku Jankwansa. He is also the indirectors leader for Ghana and for West Africa. I'm sure you saw the spirited sermon on VAT. I just want to say that, Commissioner General, we are not giving you any pressure. You can answer the question or not. But I'd like to say that when the VAT reform was announced, I stood up in my office and I was cheering as if I was watching a Black Stars match that I just scored one goal. So thank you so much for seeing that through. I'm sure the businesses are indeed happy. We'll move on right along. I'll be stealing some time from you, Aisha, and possibly from George as well. But we'll move on right along and hear from the Ministry of Finance. Representing the Honorable Minister of Finance, we have Mr. Samuel Akest, who was introduced to us. He's the Coordinating Director at the Ministry of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, he's going to share his perspective, the Ministry's perspective on the budget. Thank you very much. Please come in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And I saw that the previous speakers, apart from Vish, did presentations, so I will have to also make a sensible choice by providing something of equal graphs and numbers, and hopefully I will also have a spirited dimension. So if we can, I'm sure you all have the budget statement, so I'll be interspersing with the earlier speakers what has been said, and also make reference to the budget because we have audience that may not be of the same level of understanding some of the heavy lift of the economies. So we'll try to also take advantage to tone it down. But the budget itself, and as the earlier speaker from Fitch said, is put in context of the global economic development. So if you notice, he made references to how the external factors will be affecting Ghana in 2026 and the medium term. And what you see on the screen is how the external factors and its risk has evolved from 1990, Q1 1990, to Q3 2025. And as you look, the lines are in red, signifying risk or danger, and how that uncertainty is playing out. But what is striking is that along all that you're seeing on the screen, in 2025, the risk seems to be at its highest point. And basically, from what has happened to the geopolitics, the implementation of new tariffs, which our colleague mentioned, the likelihood of trade wars, effects of sanctions, etc., of which Ghana is operating. Now, that is 2025. When you put this context against Ghana's 2025 macroeconomic performance, that would have been a sterling performance in that score, because it is what the world is playing with. The next slide is coming from the IMF, and it's trying to juxtapose, in simple terms, the whole world in terms of growth in 2025. Now, the darker the green, the higher the growth. The lighter or the off green, the dangerous element that growth is exhibiting. And as you can see, the middle part is Africa, and Ghana is in the section there. And you can recognize that you see more growth efforts in Africa, and of course, some middle part of Asia globally. And that also confirms what our colleague from Fitch had earlier presented. So there is strength in the continent, and it's been exhibited, as he rightly said, Ghana as a forerunner in this. So the budget has a section 3 and 5 that presents the state of Ghana's economy and the outlook. And here you find the growth, both historical for 6 years and you find the projection for the next 6 years. The summary of the first 6 years is an average of about 4.1%. The summary of the projection is an average of 4.9. The key difference you see is the volatility of the past, that's the history, and a bit of the certainty of the projection. However, you've seen the strength that you've recognized in Africa. You've seen the strength in Ghana's performance in 2025. This is supposed to be the least. So there are chances that we would outperform that over the period. So these are key metrics, and I think in terms of looking at the risk, as our earlier speaker said, in Ghana, it's important that we bear this in mind. Moving ahead, I think our colleague raised a concern on widening fiscal deficit in the medium term. I've brought the overall balance of commitment. The left one is what you refer to as the budget deficit, so it's revenue and expenditure. But there's an important indicator on the right, on your right, which is the primary balance. Let me explain that. That is really calculating a subset of what are the constituents of the budget deficit, but it excludes arrears or interest payments. So it is more of current revenue minus current expenditure. But its most important metrics is that if it is in negative, then debt is increasing. If it is in a surplus, then debt is declining. So whenever you see the primary balance, you see its importance in terms of linking what you see in the budget deficit and debt. That is what links the two together. So for those of you who have been reading the IMF document, it mentions that the primary balance is a fiscal anchor. It means the entire budget is hinged on this particular metrics. But just to refresh, in the 2025 budget in March, I think if my memory serves me right, in the first introduction, the Honorable Minister mentioned as many as 10 amendments to laws. And one of them is we promulgated the Fiscal Responsibility Law, established fiscal rules, and embedded them in the Public Financial Management Act. And one of the key metrics is the primary balance. And it's supposed to be a surplus of 1.5% of GDP. So when you read the target in 2025 and the medium term, and you see the constant 1.5%, it's because the law states so. In addition to that, there is a numerical rule on public debt, that's the present value of public debt to GDP, which also states that by 2034, our public debt to GDP should be 45%. So for the first time, we have numerical rules that has been embedded in law. So in terms of looking at the outlook for Ghana, it is important we also reflect these elements into it. Now moving to the monetary policy, I think somebody is clicking. Don't move too fast. Here, you are seeing the complementary fiscal or economic tool, which is the monetary side. And what you're seeing on the screen is how inflation is behaving with the policy tool of the monetary policy one. And as you can recognize, from the early 2022, you're seeing inflation dropping into the band of the 8 plus or minus 2 as at the end of October. And you notice also the policy rate at the very far end. Combining this with the fiscal shows a tightened fiscal consolidation, combination with a tight monetary fiscal policy, bringing up the stability in inflation, interest rate, exchange rate, and the overall general macroeconomic environment. And together, all of this is ending up Okay, into the dynamics for debt. And as you can see on the screen, don't worry yourself too much on the complexity of the screen, I will explain that. But as at October 2025, the stock of debt as a ratio of GDP is at 45%. And when you look at the nominal, those tables are nominal figures. Once it's exhibiting against 2024 a lower stock, what it means is that the debt accumulation itself had gone into a negative. And again, this has been supported largely by the growth, which is large, the fiscal consolidation that has reduced the financing, and of course, the new borrowing, the currency appreciation, because about half of our debt stock is in foreign exchange, and then also a prudent debt management strategy. So these are the combination of facts that had been put to arrive at this stock variable. Then as we move on the external side, I think our colleague made reference to the trade balance, etc. So I will not dwell too much there, but I want to draw attention to also the details of the trade balance. It's not on the screen, but because I had the reference to gold. But when you look at our major exports, you've got the oil, you've got the gold, and you have the cocoa. But there's a non-traditional one. Interestingly, in 2025, the non-traditional one in terms of size is, it looks to me, bigger than cocoa and oil put together. So that is providing a non-gold direction of building up of reserves. And when you look into the budget statement in the section on the policy initiatives, you realize that the government's attention to palm oil, which had been dubbed the red gold, coincidentally is mirroring an economic activity which will be mimicking the performance that you see in gold. So in economic management, you take advantage of conditions, because what the screen I showed you, the tariffs that you saw, whenever those conditions occur, investors tend to go into safe haven, and that is where they move into commodities like gold. But if it doesn't last, as he rightly said, there could be a shift. If there could be a shift, it could be the red gold or others. So if Ghana pays attention in building the non-traditional, which itself in 2025 is showing a huge mass in, that can insulate us against the outlook that the risk that our colleague mentioned. Again, on the extreme right, you see the reserve position at 4.8 months of import cover. That is large on its own. As a country of Ghana, if you look into our economics, anything between 3 to 3.5 is comfortable. So 4.8 is highly above the threshold. Some may ask, the forecast is at 3 over the medium term, but that is what the ECOWAS and then the WAMSI, of which Ghana is a part, is using as a threshold. But again, the targets are the floors. They are not the ceiling. So once they're not the ceiling, it means we're not targeting it as the uppermost band. We are targeting it as the minimum that the country can achieve. So don't be worried when you see that, it's because you are ensuring that we'll never get below that based on the policies that we put across. Now quickly, I'll move into some of the policy initiatives, because I think it's important that we nuance the risks with some of the key actions that are new, novel, and of mega projects. First is a gas to power transition, transiting from costly light crude oil to a cleaner domestically produced natural gas. And when you read the budget, you will see the section that talks about investor appetite to almost about $3 billion within the sector of the upstream. And when you read Ghana's upstream investment, I'm not sure we've had investments over the past couple of years. And that has been mimicking itself when you go into the GDP. When you take a critical look at crude oil production, you will have seen it dwindling over time. And that is why this investment and this outlook is important. But I didn't quite hear that, so it is key that we go into the metrics of that. And that is why I've brought here the decline of the production in 2019 from 71.4 million barrels to 36 million barrels in 2025. So these kind of investments would help to project that sector. Again, one of the catalytic elements is also the introduction of a state-owned power plant with a capacity of 1,200 megawatts. I think this may be on record one of the biggest ever that we would have done in the country, because I think Akosombo is slightly below this level. So that should tell you the size of what energy power is. And energy security is important. Without energy security, everything about production and businesses sitting here will not be able to produce. Then, of course, rural electricity acceleration and urban intensification initiative. And this will help for spatial distribution of energy resources and for businesses to take advantage of this around the country. As we move to the next slide, you see other policies that would help the private sector, especially those in the SMEs. The policy on feeding our students with what we grow. And I will encourage all of you here to also support that. I think I saw some little bit of breakfast. I was keenly watching whether what we grow was part of it. Unfortunately, I didn't see that very well. But as in course, students listening to me, I think you qualify to be in that space. So when you move here and you go to your homes, the encouragement is let's support the students so we all eat what we grow. Then we also have mentioned the issue of the red gold, so I colored it red. I wouldn't go back into that side. But our development institutions like the Ghana Exim, the CBG, and other DFIs are being encouraged to focus on agriculture lending. When you do a survey with farmers, one of the key risks that they face is adequate and cheap financing in agriculture. So that is one of the major elements that the budget is highlighting. Again, we have the farmer services centers that are going to be re-equipped to help our farmer folks around the country in all the regions to support our agriculture diversification and growth. Moving from there, the big push, yes. The big push infrastructure, and I think our colleague mentioned it, the Accra-Kumasi Expressway is a game changer when completed because it has an economic dimension to it. There was an old study that was identifying that the cost of what you see in our markets here on agricultural products may be largely attributed about 70% to transportation costs. Now, if we are going to break the center of the city, the country, with a highway that can easily bring perishable products to the center and move people from one part to the other, that would really, and you can see the estimates that come from the feasibility, reduce transport costs by as far as 40% in that score. In addition, you had a World Bank funded 1,000 kilometer agriculture enclave roads program that had been highlighted by the budget. So with this, I think that the risk that Fitch provided must also be put into context with these policy measures that the government is implementing. I'm not sure the road from here to the screen is saying thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel Dankwa Akest, for that presentation. I think we started off with the economy. You pieced it all together for us and taught us even how you have considered the risk around some of the things that are being implemented. And to you as well, our audience, thank you for staying in your seats. I believe that is a sign that you are finding the conversations useful. And to our online guests as well, thank you so much. I'd just like to quickly announce we are live on Joy News TV and Joy News socials. We are also on Graphic Online TV. Graphic is our media partners for this event. We are also live on PwC Africa YouTube channel, PwC Ghana LinkedIn page, and PwC Ghana on Facebook. I was earlier instructed that perhaps I should keep Mr. Akest around the podium so that he takes his seat because we are going into the panel discussions. But I thought I should let him get some steps in by going down, receiving his handshakes before he comes back up again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take this conversation into a panel discussion, or I'm sure the moderator will give it another name. I would like to call it a fireside chat though, even though there's no fire, by reintroducing Mr. Samuel Dankwa Akest to come to the podium. Mr. Akest, please, you can use that staircase there and take the last seat. It's going to be an opportunity for us to even break the conversation down further. Thank you so much for coming. You can take that last seat there. Thank you. Yes, that one. Yes, thank you. All right. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Anthony Sapon, the Acting Commissioner General, Ghana Revenue Authority. As Abeku said, and I agreed with him, Commissioner has the leeway. He can answer some questions and leave some. I'm sure we'll equally be happy. Mr. Commissioner General, thank you so much for joining us to have this conversation. And then I introduce the moderator for this conversation, the tax leader in PwC Ghana, Aisha Bedwe Ibe. So before Aisha takes over, what is going to happen is that some QR codes are going to be displayed. You can scan them. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions, and I'm saying that to the online guests as well. But at some point, there will be roving mics as well, and we can also ask questions. My team at the back says that those will be coordinated, but I'll leave it all to Aisha. And Aisha, if you're ready, over to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Jage, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's budget discussion. It's not a fireside chat, there's no fire here, but more like a discussion between friends and professional colleagues. So you're all welcome. I'm going to go straight into the questions so we can have a good discussion. And thank you to all of you who submitted questions beforehand. I have your questions here. We also have the QR code, so please do submit your live questions, and we'll try to take all of them as much as possible. So I'm going to go straight into Mr. Akest, if you don't mind, sir. You just came off giving us a very interesting presentation. And I like what you said about the red gold and what you're developing there. But what about black gold, oil? As you said, we've seen a decline in oil production in Ghana. And of course, we'd like to see that change. We have a number of oil companies represented here, and I'm sure we'd really like to see the diversification of our economy. So could you share perhaps what government is doing to stimulate growth in that area? If there are any plans to encourage other oil majors to come into Ghana?
Thank you very much for that question. And I think the budget is clear on the investment level into that area that is running into few billions of dollars. So the answer is yes. And we're trying to encourage the investments in that. But what the budget seeks to do is also to diversify or start the progression of diversification of this country. Remember, oil and gold belong to a sector that you call extractive.
Yes.
So extractive has its own challenges when you look at it into a long-term perspective. But you also need to ensure that the angle of economic activities that cuts across the peasant farmers, all of us, the rural folks, are also encouraged. So the budget provides a balance between the two. So when I mentioned the red gold, it wasn't because there isn't any action on the black liquid, but there is a combination of the two as a strategic move.
Great. So may we expect maybe to hear a few interesting names of some oil majors coming to Ghana soon?
I'm not sure I can say that.
Sure, we'll keep listening out. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Sapon, Commissioner General, over to you. I have a question that came from our online audience beforehand, and it's about the VAT implementation. As Abeku shared in his presentation, we are all excited about the changes, but our business community are eager to know when will this happen, because of course people have to reset their financial systems, do things online to make sure that they are able to catch up and be on time. When are we looking at implementation?
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. And I'd like to also thank PwC for creating this platform for us to engage and explain some of the budget statement tax policies. So in respect of the VAT, the reform that we are doing, the bill is currently before Parliament. Actually, from here, Parliament has started looking at it at 10 a.m. So from here, I'm going straight to join my team to make sure that we are responding to their questions and explaining. We are hoping and expecting that we will get parliamentary approval before they rise for the Christmas season, and hoping that the President will also be able to assent to it. So if all these plans goes well, we will expect that the implementation should start 1st January 2026. But we will be working with the business community and start engaging to make sure that we plan well and give sufficient time to ensure that those who have to reset their systems are reset, and to ensure that they also get ready for the implementation. So we'll be coming back to you, but the overall plan is to try and get the act passed before the end of the year, and then we can plan for full implementation from January 26.
That's great news. Can we put our hands together, please? That's a big relief for the business community. Thank you so much, sir. So maybe this question will go to both of you, and you can decide who will take it first. So with the abolition of the 1% COVID levy, of course, we know there's going to be a revenue shortfall in that area. So how are we looking to shore up revenues? Because we know the country needs money to run. So we're very realistic about that. What are the plans to shore up the lost revenues from the abolition of the COVID levy? I don't know if Mr. Sapon, you want to go first, or Mr. Akest.
Let me start, and then he is in charge of policy. I do the implementation. So I'll start from the implementation point of view. So you are quite right. The 1% COVID levy is estimated to give off about 3.7 billion revenue. But you also notice that government policy has been deliberate, and to say that we are not introducing new taxes, and at the same time, taxes that the businesses and individuals believe must go off are going. So, you know, rightly from 2020, the beginning of 25, some taxes were already abolished, the betting tax and the others, and currently we have the COVID levy. But we believe that there are certain measures that if we take today or from 2026, they are going to just ensure that the revenues will come in. So one of the things we are doing is increasing the leverage of compliance. We believe that if we do compliance, a lot more will come. So currently, we have started compliance on certain sectors. For example, in the steel industry, we have over 100 steel companies, but the top end are the manufacturers. And we've done a lot of compliance work on them. So we'll be running them around in terms of industry base. Secondly, and this will be good news for colleague professionals, we're also going to engage professional firms to increase the scope of compliance audit we do from 2026. We do have the GRA audit tax team, but our coverage based on assessment is low. So we're going to work with tax professional firms, accounting firms like PwC to ensure that we are expanding the coverage of compliance. And when we do, again, we believe that will grow. If you look at the OECD statistics, it's certainly when you do compliance, it really can bring your revenue up between 15 to 20%. So when we do that, we believe that will give a form. Is the implementation of the Fiscal Electronic Devices Act, which has been in the law since 2018. That simply means that for every retailer of every issuance of VAT, the law mandates that we invest in technology so that these VATs are collected electronically. We haven't done that yet. So you'll notice that the minister signaled in the budget statement that 2020, half of 2026, that will come upstream. That will be a big changer. But what that will afford is that as soon as you are selling at the retail shops, the system that we are introducing is going to intervene and make sure that GRA has a mirror copy of the transactions. And the phase 2 is also to ensure that even as the payment is done, the taxes move straight to government account. So as we move forward, this 30-day credit that we have will eventually give way with the introduction of the FED system.
Great, thank you. Mr. Akest, anything to add?
Yeah, maybe just to add a bit, because I think your question is how we're going to show up the revenue.
Yes.
Just also bear in mind that this year there's been effectively 2 budget statements.
Mm-hmm.
The one done in 2025, we've announced certain revenue measures that took place not from January to end of year, but were taking place in year. Its full stream would occur in 2026. So whenever you're doing revenue calculations and then forecast, you also analyze it. And that analyzation itself brings a buoyancy to the tax. Then as my colleague had mentioned, the static figure was what he showed you. But how the reduction in the cost of doing business would increase capacity utilization in industry and etc., of course, is the private sector. It's implied in terms of shoring up revenue, not in the short term or long term. Because the evidence also shows that you can't tax 50% and get 50% growth in revenue, but sometimes the compliance, as he said, contributes effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you just permit me just to add extend it for one big area that we are introducing. We all talk about the informal sector. So for 2026, this is one of the areas that we're going to focus on. And we're focusing on calling it the modified taxation scheme. Modified taxation schemes. This scheme says that if your income is up to 500,000, that is $500,000, the income tax you pay is 3%. 3%. So if you take a trader whose income is 200,000, then we're saying your income tax for the whole year is 6,000. If you take a trader whose income is 25,000, you say what you are paying, 750 Ghana cedis. We believe that this is going to make the collection of taxes in this area simple. And we, again, using the means of technology. So GRA has developed an app, and we are going to work with agents for the various constituencies and business associations. You register, you pay on the app, and you can get your receipt and your tax clearance certificate on the same app. So the trader, the simple business individual, doesn't need to move to GRA office. We will come into you. So our appeal is all of us must contribute to taxation, and we are making it simple through the modified taxation for the informal sector and for the categories of businesses whose income are below or up to $500,000 Ghana cedis.
Okay, that's great news because we've had modified taxation in the tax law for some time, so it's good to see that being implemented. I want to talk about transportation costs. I believe when we're having the presentation from our friends at Fitch, they mentioned projected lower transportation costs. Fitch, you can correct me if I am wrong. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I was showing the chart on the different CPI components, showing that transport costs have now slipped into deflation territory. Mm-hmm. It is also true that we believe that Brent crude prices, so global oil prices, are going to remain quite muted into next year. So that should put a lid on how much transport costs in Ghana can grow next year.
Okay. And I think it's important for transportation costs to be low because, of course, that also impacts prices. But let's talk about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are growing in terms of usage all over the world. And indeed, we are seeing them here in Ghana as well. They are easier to maintain and manage and cost effective. And we are talking about both the bicycles, the tricycles, and of course, the vehicles themselves, also accessible. There are a number of charging points. Now, I think the issue that importers have is the high duty rates at the port. Because of course, in other countries, electric vehicles are seen to be good for the environment, and so they enjoy concessional rates. Are we going to see any movement in that direction in Ghana? Commissioner General, would you like to take that? Should we start with policy? Mr. Akest, okay, we'll start with policy.
Did the budget say that, or you are?
No, we are asking.
You are preempting.
We are preempting, and we're asking because it's a big thing in the business community now, and it would be good to know government's thoughts around that.
I think that we can make new policies as we sit here. If there are policies, it will be grounded and then it will be made available in the budget statement. So I would kindly request that you keep that question in wait.
Okay.
If it is a recommendation that is arising from here with regards to looking into replacing, because I think that's a key metrics in the budget also, the green environment. I think it's all being done in various aspects. The budget in the section 6, I think for the first time has a whole narrative on the green part, which I believe also covers but as we go along, I mean, there will be more policies that will be unfolded within that space.
That's great. Thank you. That's good to hear. Commissioner General?
So let me add, if you look at the president vision in terms of the energy, I think his strategy called it the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition. And I am aware that currently there's a bill that will be going to Parliament to look at that area. So my expectation is that through the bill and establishment of the proper structures, these areas, the policies will eventually evolve as we go forward.
That's great news. Thank you so much. Can we put our hands together for the Commissioner General and Mr. Akers from the Ministry of Finance? So I have a question from the audience that was submitted earlier. I'll just read it. And then I think we've addressed parts of it, but it would be good to also focus. So it says, what about any tax benefits on PAYE to stimulate consumption and economic growth? So we know that that was not in the budget, but I think people would like to know, are there any plans or intentions? So perhaps, Commissioner General, you could make some comments around that.
So broadly, the minister announced that in 2026, government will work on the overall income tax, the Revenue Administration Act. So that is the area that PAYE falls. So I will believe that once the work starts, we'll engage the business and the tax community, and by the time the work progresses, any changes in that area will be taken into account.
Okay, wonderful. Another question, I believe this will go to Mr. Akers. So it says tax to GDP ratio. What are we going to do to increase it, and how will we measure the increase? So I think we've touched on that briefly, but perhaps, Mr. Akers, if you could address that question for our audience, please.
Right. The tax effort, what you are referring to is the tax effort, and it's measured by the tax revenue divided by the nominal GDP. The interesting aspect of this metrics is that as the GDP grows bigger, then the tax also has to grow at a larger rate to see that growing. And for almost in countries within our ecology zone should be around 20%. And I think last year or early this year, for the very first time, we have a medium-term revenue strategy that has put in a number. When you look at the ratios for the medium term, you will notice that the tax revenue is moving away from the 13 to 14 and then to 15 in a gradualistic manner. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So we are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So just to add to that, so overall, if you look at the medium-term strategy of government, is to move into the regions of 18 to 20% as we populate, say, some of our countries that we compare to are. But in Ghana, and I think this is a challenge, maybe I'll throw to PwC and some of the firms for us to look at how we then measure the tax to GDP in Ghana. So if we take Ghana into account, we have the tax revenue and non-oil tax revenue. So our GDP includes, the overall GDP includes the economic value of oil. However, when we are talking about tax to GDP, it's only the tax revenue. The revenues you obtain from oil are excluded. So ab initio, your numerator and denominator are not on the same wavelength. The second one is agriculture. Agri probably contributes over 30% to the GDP, but income from cocoa board is not inside the tax revenue. The tax exemptions that we give to boost agriculture are not considered. So you then have a huge GDP base from oil, from agric, that are included in the GDP, but when you come to the revenue side, it's not. So I think this is a conversation we should have in terms of when we are measuring ourselves to tax to GDP. Should we have a true scenario where we are looking at tax revenue to non-oil, non-agri GDP to give us a good sense, because then you are comparing that economy and its revenue impact. Then overall, including oil revenue and agri revenue together with tax revenue, and compare with the overall GDP. I think this is a conceptual area it will be interesting to have a study on, so that we measure ourselves clearly in terms of the efforts.
Thank you. Point well noted. PwC has noted this. Great. Thank you. Again, please scan if you have any questions you'd like to submit. But I'm going to go with another question that was submitted in advance. And the person says, what are the steps the government is taking to ensure unaccustomed goods, imported flour in quotes, pay to requisite duties and taxes to increase tax revenue and create a level playing field for local producers of flour? So, Commissioner John, I believe maybe you could handle this one. Thank you.
So this is part of the customs or import duty that we pay at the port. Today, we have identified that there are certain key areas that we have significant challenge, and that leads to revenue leakages. One is the country of origin. So if some of you listen to the minister, we did some work where, for example, a ship sales is coming from South America. By the time it gets to Ghana, the record says it came from Egypt. You know, that affects the freight calculation and everything. That is one. The second one is misclassification, where a rice is classified as gypsum powder. You know, gypsum powder is below 5%, while the rice is maybe 20%. So that is misclassification. These two factors affect overall valuation of duties that we have. So in the budget statement, the minister announced that we are introducing an AI technology that will limit or remove the human intervention in all these processes. And what the AI will do is it will quickly look at all the data and give us a sense of what the duty will be. That will then be compared with the duty that will be calculated by GRA officers. And the process is such that if the AI is generating more duty than the officer, we then flag it and go into it to ensure that the right duties are paid. We've actually done a proof of concept. And it's interesting to know that for the sample that we did, the revenues were going up between 40 to 45%. So if you have used the AI for those samples, the duties would have upside not less than 40%. The second one is also the AI is helping us with risk profiling. So not all goods coming in are wholesome, they are narcotic goods. And again, it's interesting that the AI is able to tell us that the importers, the shipment, where it's coming from, will risk profile it. So yesterday we received parliamentary approval to go ahead with that project. We're going to start a pilot in December for about 2 months and do a full rollout in Q1 of 2026. We believe that this investment in the technology will help us first to bring parity, because some people are paying correctly and some are not. And number two, to upside the revenue. But overall for business, if you all get the revenue being paid correctly, then it gives government opportunity to rationalize even the rates downwards, because then all of us are contributing, we are paying correctly, and government can then take opportunity to rationalize the rates.
Great, that's great, thank you. So I can see we're all a little bit shy in terms of submitting our questions online. So I'll give a couple of people an opportunity to raise their hand. So a mic will come to you and you can introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is Jürgen Erke of GIZ, German International Corporation. And I'd like to ask about the expected effects of CD appreciation. I've already typed the question. Is it because on the one hand, of course, I think we all appreciate the upsides, specifically with respect to servicing foreign debt. But then, to me, there's also some Dutch disease feeling about it. I mean, how would you assess the risk of hurting exporting industries and the prospects of establishing Ghana as a production hub, also within the region with regard to ECOWAS and beyond, by an exchange rate that is suddenly, round about 30% higher than it used to be? Yeah, thank you.
you very much. Mr. Akers, would you like to take that?
Just for clarity, just to be sure the question is clear, because it wasn't very audible here. What you're referring to is the effect of appreciation of the currency on export market?
Yes, especially on industries beyond extractives. For example, car production that has been established and growing in the past years.
Right. Okay, so I think that in terms of the macroeconomy, because I'm not a producer, and this could be unique to each of the sectors that could be in there from the non-extractive. So an appreciation of the currency, in theory, makes your exports non-competitive, and that's the issue that you're raising. But that is what the mechanics say. But remember, if there are industry that use imports as intermediate inputs, then the cost of that intermediate inputs will be cheaper. So for example, if you look into the budget, you realize that there are growing elements of textile industry that is importing the main actions and then adding value from labor. I'm not sure when you pick industries of that characteristics, because in one side, the input cost will be lower, and then, so that may net out. But what you're referring to are the ones that may be using wholly Ghanaian inputs. Now, at that stage, the cost of their inputs will be larger because the cedi is now stronger, and then their receivables in cedi based on exports will be lower. So you should be seeing some, but that will be the reality of the characteristics that you do have. Now, as we go forward, I think we are all coming to the reality of what it means moving into 2026. And I believe it's also arising from that the budget had the position in which it did, by providing tax relief, by also providing some other support in some of the identified sectors which may be falling into this. And then there's also the natural dialogue that the Honorable Minister is going to institutionalize that will be bringing some of these organized entities for discussions in terms of availability of what can be done to help in that angle. Again, let's bear in mind that the macro environment, I believe, would also, in your positively with regards to the cost of borrowing as we move into 2026. So if you put all of this together, I think the metrics of assessing the competitiveness of our local industry will not be measured only by the appreciation of the currency alone, but by also other important metrics like the interest rate, the domestic inflation rate, the economic activities that are happening, and then some of the initiatives that are putting real monies into the environment of businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You have another question? Yes.
Yeah, a question from you. My name is Daniel. There have been some incentives to support the capital markets over the past few years. However, the sunset clause on those capital gains tax has expired, and both the previous government and the current government in the current budget have not touched on the need to reintroduce that incentives. Are there any plans to reintroduce the capital gains tax exemption?
Okay, Commissioner General.
Thank you very much. So, as you rightly said, the sunset clause has elapsed, and we are currently in an environment where we have to pay taxes on the capital gain. So today, as I sit here, I've started going after some companies and individuals, and I'm collecting the taxes. But of course, we've also received appeals from the capital gains market and some individuals, and those have been forwarded to the Ministry of Finance. We're going to work together with them to look at it. If it's decided as government policy to reintroduce it, I believe the minister will lead in that conversation. If not, then it means that we will continue with the current situation. But what I can say is that it's currently being looked at.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you. Please, your name, please, and where you're from.
My name is Akwesi. I'm coming from Contractor Construction UK. So obviously that's a construction firm. Yes. My question is that the budget was big on VAT reforms. And my question is based on that. How will the VAT reform apply to sectors dominated by exempt suppliers, such as public infrastructure and civil works, where input tax are normally not recoverable. Is it going to touch on it? Because at the moment, these taxes are basically cost for us. Is it going to be visited?
So the major bold reforms on the VAT were clearly announced, which is revising the threshold and then also removal of the COVID levy, the decoupling also removed, and which effectively brings down the effective rate from 21.9% to 20%. And also significantly for businesses, you know, within the current regime, the levies are not deductible. So the 6% is a cost to businesses. And within these reforms, we're saying that the 6% together with a flat, with a standard rate of the 15%, making 20%, are all deductible. That means that businesses have opportunity to lower their costs and increase their profit from the currently non-deductibility. So that is how we've looked at it in terms of the reforms for the VAT area. But if you are an industry where you are exempt from charging VAT and your inputs include VAT, depending upon the industry that you are in, some do have what we call the refund scheme. So that's an area that we can look at specifically whether if you are the taxpayer, you qualify in terms of the refund. So you make your output is not is VAT exempt or zero rated, but you may qualify for a refund for the input. So we have to specifically look into your case.
Okay. So there's another question, but before
My name is...
that question comes, sorry, 1 minute. Before that question comes, there's a question from the audience. Perhaps, Mr. Akes, you can take this one. It says, expenditure to GDP is growing from 14.2% to 15.3% on a GDP that is growing at 4.9%. But we are still projecting to hold a single-digit inflation of 8%. History says it is not possible. How different will it be this time? Mr. Akes, if you could oblige the member of our business community, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me get the statistics that you said very well. That expenditure is growing by what?
From 14, expenditure to GDP.
Expenditure to GDP.
Is growing from 14.2% to 15.3%.
Right.
Then GDP is growing at 4.9%. And then the person is saying, but we are still projecting to hold single digits inflation at 8%.
Right.
History says it's not possible. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, but let me correct the question.
Yes, please do.
You are expressing nominal expenditure and you express it as a ratio of nominal GDP. The growth rate is on real GDP. So you've taken out the element of price and you can't conveniently compare the two. What he's trying to make the reference to, if you're looking at expenditure growth, then you can either look at the growth in expenditure nominal, then you look at the growth, the nominal GDP growth. And when you look at the two, you realize that there is a link that in history tells you, and in practice tells you, whenever we're doing the forecast for the entire budget, we use the GDP as a denominator. And when you use the GDP as a denominator, you realize that the history was showing the expenditure to GDP higher than what you have in the
budget.
Yeah, the budget, and then to the medium term. So that is where the comparison can come in. In a similar vein, it's like tax to GDP. You can't relate the effort we mentioned, the 14%, to the growth, but rather you look at it from the nominal GDP, where all economic activities are, and that is how you can measure those metrics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the answer is that it is possible if you compare like with like.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And in fact, don't forget that I mentioned earlier that the primary balance is a surplus.
Yes.
So what that means is that you're not adding on to the debt. That implies that expenditure is not growing as fast.
Yep.
And that you have the denominator growing largely bigger than the entire total expenditure.
Great.
So that's also one way that you can look at it in terms of looking at the credibility of the expenditure actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, please, our question now. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Prince Arthur from ATC. My questions are on the VAT reform. So I want to ask the Commissioner, in terms of the VAT reform, are you replacing the 2015 Act or you are just amending the Act? And then secondly, on the other VAT rates that we have, like the real estate, the flat rate, are they still going to be enforced or they are going to also move on to the 20% flat? And the last one is on withholding VAT. Since we want to ensure compliance across board, are we going to abolish the withholding VAT? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much on the VAT reform. So just to recalibrate your questions, you asked 3 questions in one.
So
the first one is,
yes.
okay, are you amending the 2015 Act or you are replacing it entirely?
All right, thank you. So we are bringing in entirely new bill. So it's entirely new bill. So that will repeal the existing one and a new act will be passed. Then in terms of the standard and flat rate, in the new bill, the flat rates are all going away. So we are introducing just the standard rate that is going to be applicable to all. So the flat rates are all moving away in terms of this new bill. But, of course, this is before Parliament. So what Parliament finally approves is what actually will be in the law. But what is before them as a bill is not going with the options of how do you call it, flat rates. So one standard rate, 15%, that is what is in the bill. Then you talked about the withholding tax, right?
Withholding VAT.
Withholding VAT. That I need to come back. I can't recollect what the new bill actually has on that. Yeah.
Come back to you on that. Thank you very much for your question. Do you have any other questions? There's a question here. Please tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Amate Fiu from Nocheski Solar in Tema. I would like to start with what you said, Aisha, concerning renewables. I think that there's a big tie-in with food security, agriculture, and solar power technologies in this country. And I wish that as a country we could take this a bit more seriously. I know that you did mention briefly about the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition, but I think it's not enough. And the time has come for us to take this extremely seriously. It's going to provide jobs. It's going to provide energy for processing and also to boost agriculture and enhance food security and all kinds of enhancements or benefits that come with this. And so please, this goes out to the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy, and the Ministry of Agriculture. I'll be expecting a call from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe they've noted the comments.
I think that's a very good comment. And it's, as I said, and I said the president has established the ministry, and he said that's not enough. But just also remember that government works with laws and structures. And I did mention that currently there's a bill before Parliament. So I believe the government has moved on from creating the ministry into now creating the structures and processes that will allow government to work on these areas. So we'll be looking forward to engage more when the bill is passed.
In other words, expect a call very soon. All right, so I have another question from our audience before I come back to the live questions. Maybe Mr. Akas may take this one, or both of you may. What practical frameworks currently ensure accountability and real service delivery post-budget statement readings? So I believe this is really about implementation and how we'll stick to what is in the budget and make sure that it becomes a reality. So what practical frameworks currently ensure this? Mr. Akas, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much. So what you've mentioned is post-approval of the budget.
Yes.
How is the budget implemented? is implemented at all the various stakeholders, that's the ministries, departments, and agencies. It's not only the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance. All the actions for the ministries, departments, and agencies will be guided by instructions that come from the Ministry of Finance. There is a budget implementation instruction, but it's not necessarily for the public, but it goes to the ministries, departments, especially with regards to the compliance matters of the budget, communication of what Parliament had given them in terms of their approved budget, the requirements from them in terms of actualizing their work plan, their procurement plan, and then the requirements that they want the Ministry of Finance to adhere to. So they also submit that on a quarter-to-quarter basis to the Ministry of Finance. And after that, the Ministry of Finance also provides quarterly ceilings to all the various ministries, and they also pass it on to all the various cost centers. Again, from the Ministry of Finance perspective, because then the integrity of the budget as far as the macroeconomic considerations are, there are other established committees by law, like the Economic Policy Coordinating Committee, there are cash management committees, there are various committees that also meet periodically in accordance to the law that establishes the strength and application of the budget statement as has been done. And I'm sure that you can see that the 2025, though put up in March, you can see the budget statement has actually articulated all the various actions that had been done clearly, and also the finance minister highlighted that the various ministries and departments, because they are accountable to the people, will also highlight their information to Parliament, the publication of also their implementation that way. So by December, we'll have approved the budget. By January, we go into implementation mode. We'll have also a monitoring mode, and then we have also the accounting and evaluation, because he asked about the accountability of it.
Yes.
You have also the audit function that will come in, and then the cycle begins one more time.
Great. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. Commissioner General, you wanted to add?
Yes, just to add to that, and I'd like to borrow Abeku's simple presentation, which is looking at the budget from revenue, expenditure, and surplus or deficit. So this is the framework within which the budget is managed, and it's managed through what we call the Public Financial Management Act. So there's a whole act and regulations that guides the actions of ministries, departments, and agencies. That includes in terms of execution, procedures to follow, monitoring and accounting. And that's also the reason why half-yearly the minister is mandated to appear before Parliament to account for how the budget has been run for the first half of the year. And then again, when he goes before them in the second half, also give a full picture of it. So the Public Financial Management Law is the underlying regulatory framework for management of the budget, which is both the revenue side and the expenditure side.
Thank you very much. Do you have any more questions from the audience? Okay, there's one question here.
Good morning. My question is to Mr. Sam, and it's a takeoff from what Aisha you mentioned in terms of the EV and the gentleman that referred on solar here. It may not be immediate, but I know we're talking a lot about the EV front, and I feel saddened when, as Africa, we try to follow trends that are happening globally, and EV has become a huge trend. The challenges that are there, and I want to know whether this has been thought about, or if there is going to be a policy that is going to come in. Anything that you do with electronic vehicles means it's all about mining. And we are talking about doing EV because it's supposed to be environmentally friendly. But mining is not environmentally, because there's going to be more need, more demand of it. Which then means that if we're going to require to charge these electronic vehicles, we need power. And power is generated by water, which means water is going to become scarce. So we know the global trends is already beginning to show that water is going to be one of the most expensive mineral, more expensive than gold and silver, and Fitch is already showing that gold prices are going to go up. So I want to know whether we've really thought about the cause and effect, and whether we are going to have a policy on that. And obviously, as much as solar is very positive, solar cannot be recycled as of now. unless there's any new technology that is going to come in, and it contains lithium and cobalt, which also leads to mining. So while we say let's push solar, we need to also have facilities that will enable recycling for this. So my question is, have we thought about this rather than just saying we're following an international requirement and trend for climate change?
Thank you very much for that question. And let me say that in terms of government policy, as I said already, it is an evolving area. And currently the government is putting a bill before Parliament. But I believe once the bill is passed and the structures are put in place, the relevant officers who work in this area will certainly take account of all the evolving issues and the challenges to ensure that whatever policies government comes out will be in the best interest of the nation, will be in the best interest of businesses, and for all of us to take advantage of. But certainly, I believe that there's a role for energy, green energy, solar in the mix of things, as well as other factors that needs to be considered.
Great, thank you. Let me just remind our audience that we can also pose questions to Fitch. They're still online, so if you have any questions you'd like Fitch to answer from their very comprehensive presentation, they are online to answer. We'll take the next question from the audience, and then I'll read one that has been submitted as well. Please.
Hello, Ken Thompson. I think you talked about technology for the informal sector to pay tax. Okay, what's the incentive for my plumber to pay tax? So the tech is there for compliance, but what is the incentive for the plumber or the electrician or the house help to actually pay tax?
Thank you.
And the question, broadly speaking, deals with all the things that we enjoy, who should pay for them. So we want our kids to go to good schools, enjoy free SHS. How do we pay for that? When we are sick, we want to be in a hospital that provides us with the services. How do we pay for that? We want to build the Accra-Kumasi Expressway, reducing travel distance by 40% and obviously transport costs. Who will pay for that? So what we are bringing to the plumber, the informal sector, is that it is going to be all of us collectively, in our own small ways, contributing to the national pot to pay for the services that government must deliver for us. And in many respects, in this country, we focus on the large corporates and middle-level businesses. What we are saying is that every city counts. And therefore, if we can get the informal and the artisans to contribute their bit, it will help. So let me just give you a bit of statistics about that. So we estimate about the group of informal sector in Ghana to be about 8 million. We believe that out of this 8 million, maybe 50% will earn income around 200,000 Ghana cedis in a year. So we're saying that 200,000 Ghana cedis, we're working with such businesses and individuals to pay 6,000 Ghana cedis a year out of the 200,000. So if you get even 25% of the 8 million, that is adding 10 billion Ghana cedis, almost 1 billion USD into the tax net. If you get the entire 8 million into the tax net, we are adding over 40 billion plus. So this is the way that we're going. It looks small, but it's a numbers game. If you're able to get them, we will increase it. So first, we've engaged, for example, the creative arts industry. There are many groups within that area. We've met with the minister and the association executives, and they are very looking forward to this. We're working with our various market business associations who are doing that. We've engaged the pharmacy society. They have a database of about 20,000 chemists.
Wow.
Which can contribute into this area. So we believe that if we work in this area, we can certainly have a lot of revenue coming from there and afford government to be able to provide the services that we need. But in terms of when we launched this program, the Ministry of Finance announced that by mid-year in 2026, they will also announce some incentives, particularly for informal sectors that are in this area. So we'll be looking forward to actual incentives that will give something back physically into people, in addition to the services that we will all enjoy from the government.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, sounds like a lot of tax education, a lot of engagement from the Ghana Revenue Authority, and that's a step in the right direction. So, as we wrap up, because my time is up, I'd like to get closing comments from my panelists. So, perhaps Mr. Akest, we can start with you. Any final comments you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, I think today half of it has been on taxes, so I will just do the final based on the very insightful question that our colleague had asked. Taxation has been there since the dawn of time, from the Roman Empire all the way to date, and it's not supposed to have an exception. When you look into the Constitution, it's also embedded there, on the article from 174, moving across. So if I look at it, one of the canons of taxation is equity. So why should us sitting here, formalized, be paying the tax rates that we have, and you walk across the street, the next person who is there, because it's classified as informal, should not add up to that. There's also a macroeconomic effect. When you are progressing from a low income to a middle income, direct taxes are better forms because they don't have a significant impact on inflation, etc. But if you have a large informal sector, it breeds a high indirect taxes that also comes back to hit those who are contributing to the PAYE. So there's an incentive that we should all be able to encourage. When the burden is shared across all, it makes it easier for all of us to participate in nation building. So that's where I think I will end up in closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When the burden is shared, it helps all of us. Commissioner General, comments from you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. When Ake started talking, I said you should be careful because Honorable Setepe is here. I'm talking about tax history. Yes. So, but let me start from the broader angle of the budget. So you will notice that in 2025, government has worked very hard to stabilize the economy. And it has signaled that in 2026, it's a transformation journey that is going on. So you see a lot of investment signals that government is going to do to support the expansionary project, expansionary move in the economy. So you see the investment in power and gas plant, investment in the big push, the expressway, as business communities, as individuals. Government has signaled the necessary infrastructure investments. We must also prepare ourselves to take advantage of the opportunities that this creates, especially with an environment where lending rates are coming down and interest rates are coming down, the inflation is coming down. It creates an overall opportunity for us. Let's support and work with government in partnership and make sure that we build our businesses, we expand the economic activities so that growth will come. With growth coming, certainly jobs will come, and with jobs coming, certainly we will create a wealth that will be needed for all. However, for government to do all of this, and as Abeku said, all of us from the budget statement must contribute 8,000 Ghana cedis per head to support government activities. So coming from GRA, my appeal is that all of us, every cedi counts. Let's be in the spirit and in the habit of voluntary compliance as far as our tax obligations are concerned. And we are just simply asking you, know your taxes, pay your taxes, and let's build Ghana together. And when we do, we'll grow the economy, we'll create the jobs, and we'll transform the economy in the reset agenda and the vision that the President has set for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Know your taxes and pay your taxes. So before we close, I cannot close without taking the mic to Honorable Setekpe, who is here. He's smiling, but I know that he will have something to say, a message, either from the President or a few wise words of wisdom for us. So can we have the microphone come to Honorable Setekpe? Can we put our hands together for him, please? We thought he would escape, but no way. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I must apologize. I came here earlier, but had to represent the President at another function, and that's how come some of you are now seeing me. I don't have much to add. The Commissioner General is around, but just one comment on the small entities and whether they should I think the flat rate is supposed to simplify, their obligations in lieu of both the flat rate VAT and, the income tax. So once that flat rate is paid, it simplifies. On the other hand, if they want to, they grow big and they fall above the threshold, which itself has been adjusted significantly, presumably to bring the, then many of them, if they are sole proprietors, are going to be falling within the brackets. And the bracket is graduated. There's the exempt 5% and then it goes up. So that incentive is within. But also, I think that one of the things which we often overlook is that many years back, I recall that for you to get a 5-year tax holiday, for you to get location allowance and all those things, it had to go through GIPC, not GIPC, GIC at the time. Some of these are now embedded in the tax law. So I think what we also need is for GRA to promote a lot more tax practitioners who can have 20, 25 of these small entities, do their records, as it happens in advanced countries and the rest. Some may get certain allowances which unless you file, child education and whatever, dependency. So those are some of the things which are missing, which I think in our future tax, reforms, we should. The adjustments for inflation in even the bands benefits low-income taxpayers. Inflation creep. So previously when we were not adjusting the bands, it meant that the more income you earn, whether in the formal or informal sector, salaries, all right, you jump quickly. If it's say 10,000 and I get 5,000, salary, 5,000, and as you go up, then you are getting into the higher creep. If you adjust the bands. So these are some of the reforms that are taking place. And I think if we look deeper, sometimes they sound too technical, but if we look deeper as practitioners here, you realize that certain things are being, brought back. I think the Commissioner General and Samuel said the issue, of the 20% of the VAT rate. I think the focus should be on the extent to which there was a lot of cascading. Cascading in the sense that previously, Debt Fund and NHIL at 2.5%, and now Infrastructure Investment Fund, but the two, where you could get input tax credits on them, businesses, just as so they were collected as though they were VAT, and so it becomes actually a budget appropriation, right? What is given to Get Fund and whatever would be net. That's why sometimes it delays, because the minister has to wait for the Commissioner General GRA to calculate the amount due to the Get Fund net of the credit and refund, which businesses are taking, right? Once you turn them into straight levies and you added other levies, no input tax credit. That means all those taxes were going into the base of the VAT, right, before you calculate the VAT. So the effective rate, if I were to add all the levies, we are not talking about 21.5. We are talking about probably somewhere around 23, 24. Because all those, so as the COVID levy and others are being removed, right, that also is having an impact on the VAT, because they are not being added to cost before calculating the VAT. So it's a question, what's the effective rate? And the reason you cannot go back to the old 17.5% immediately is that realistically they will bring in revenue. So until the automation and other reforms come in and you strengthen the VAT base again, right, you may jeopardize the fiscal, by just bringing it straight to 17.5. It takes about 2 years for a reform. So let's hope that as the reforms come in, we will be coming down to 17.5, which is the sub-Saharan African rate. So we are just 2.5%. And hopefully, if it strengthens, then you also see, a few more levies, also going away. We used to have 2 levies, and that's my last point, please. 2 levies, which is the fiscal stabilization levy, which we also call the national stabilization levy, and the temporary import duty. They were used to complement austerity IMF programs, if you want. Severe cuts in expenditure, because then that has a social impact. But then they went away after the IMF programs, and then they were reintroduced. That's how the names kept changing, right? So if you have these two handles, you know the purpose, right? But they shouldn't have been embedded in the tax regime, the cascade, right? So I think some of these rationalizations that are taking place, together with the expenditure reforms, the reintroduction of gift meals, accrual accounting, and the rest, which we don't have, much time to discuss, are all, going to assist, in making the tax regime generate the revenue, whilst also reducing its impact, the burden on businesses, and individuals. It takes 2 to 3 years to achieve this, and I would hope that therefore it's a question of let us sustain the reforms, let us sustain the tax regimes, the dominant tax regimes. I think it is a change that occurs. Some of us who have a long memory from VAT have seen what's happened to the VAT over the last, since 1999, when it came in. We've been tampering with the VAT, right? And the surprising thing is that I listed it somewhere in a book I just published. Many of the levies we are introducing were actually removed. There were 11 of them or so when the VAT was introduced, because we're broadening the tax base. But we have gone back and we are reintroducing them. And so we are going back to those days. What have we achieved? So I think we must, all work for the stability of the tax regime, especially managers of the economy. And that is what would reduce the burden, for businesses in a more consistent, continuous basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Seth. Thank you to my panelists, and also thank you to Fitch for staying on to the end of the program. So I'm going to hand back over to Jijeja right now, and I'm going to take a picture with my panelists before we descend the stage. Thank you. Jijeja, over to you.
Indeed, thank you so much. The panelists will just take a picture. We'll take all the other pictures after the closing remarks, so just take a quick picture. Thank you so much, Mr. Seth Terkper, former Finance Minister, Economic Advisor to the President, for those comments. Very useful. Mr. Samuel Dankwa Akes, Director, Real Sector, Ministry of Finance, and Mr. Anthony Sapon, Acting Commissioner General, Ghana Revenue Authority, and Aisha Bedwe Ibe, our moderator, WMA, and Ghana Tax Leader, and also Global People Leader at PwC for Tax. Thank you so much. Let's appreciate them as they step down. So throughout the conversations we'll be having, I noticed someone who was always taking keen notes on his tablet. I'm not sure whether the tablet will make it to the podium. He's the assurance leader in PwC Ghana. He is going to just pretty much walk us through the key takeaways and also give us the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, George Ahen from PwC.
Thank you very much, Judge. And good morning to you all. It's pretty interesting to be here this morning. And I find it very, should I say, daunting to be talking before two very senior people in the room that I have known for many years. The first person is Honorable Seth Terkper. He was my tax lecturer at the university. So to be here, you could tell the lectures he gave this morning when the question was asked. Over and beyond that, there is an individual who has always been chasing me to pay e-levy before he even became the commissioner, and that is our very own Anthony Sapon. He was my teaching assistant. So this morning he said, my bill is going to be doubled for coming to talk. So Thank you very much for being here this morning. My job is simple, just to highlight some of the few things we spoke about this morning and some of the things we'll be taking back to the ministry coming out of this discussion. To start off with, I would say it's been very, very, very insightful and useful. And I believe those online also find it very useful, just as those in the room. What we discussed this morning really touched around the theme of the budget. And throughout the discussion, you could tell that we were touching on three key areas, which is growth, economic transformation, and then jobs. We did not touch so much on jobs, but we know what we spoke about, economic transformation, clearly leads into or fits into the job sector. So what did we say about growth? Our colleagues at Fitch did mention that the budget broadly supports growth, which is good news for us. There is a history we've shown through our GDP growth, and our projection or forecast for FY26 shows a 5% growth, which is a healthy growth for us as a nation. So it gives us a bit of comfort in the area of growth, and that was very well deliberated this morning. In the area of economic transformation, we spoke about quite a number of things. Our colleagues again from Fitch did mention that the measures put in place by the government to drive the recovery or continue to drive the recovery of our economy. They did mention a number of factors that were outlined in the budget that will help us, and in this room and the discussions through the panel, they've also mentioned quite a number of them. One of them is the expressway, which is believed will connect two large cities and create a lot of opportunities. We also touched on the extension of the electricity grid, GPP2, which is going to enhance and open up a lot of industries and provides energy security. We spoke about red gold as one of the areas of diversifying from our overdependent on the benefit we are taking from the increasing gold price. So it's an area where we're seeking to grow oil palm to generate more foreign exchange earnings for the country. We spoke about the school feeding, where we spoke about growing what we should feed our schools with what we grow. And finally, we spoke about financing agric. So these are key areas that we've touched on this morning, which are very, very relevant in executing this budget that we have mentioned. But overall, all that we have spoken about today about the economic transformation side will feed clearly into the job creation side. We know we have a very growing youth population, and the unemployment rate is very high. We have the fastest growing youth population in the world in terms of Africa, and in Ghana we have a very, very high unemployment within the youth sector. And with these initiatives, we believe it will help address some of the unemployment problems we are facing. Having said all this, we mentioned this must be financed, and the way to finance it is largely through the fiscal measures that we have mentioned. One is taxes. It was clear from what we have heard today that each one of us will have to pay 8,000 Ghana cedis to be able to finance the budget that has been read. To be able to do that, to enable the government to spend 9,000 on each of us. And that will leave us with a deficit of 1,000, which we must look for ways of closing. But then, interestingly, we touch on the portion or a part of the discussion we spoke about the elimination of the COVID levy and the gap it will further create in the 9,000 per head revenue generation. But we got the opportunity to hear the measures that have been put in place to address that, one of which is the modified taxation where individual organizations or entrepreneurs who are earning less than $500,000 cedis will have to pay a flat tax rate of 3%. We also spoke about the fact that efficient mobilization of tax will help rake in more revenue and not necessarily increasing the tax net, the tax burden on the corporate sector or the formal sector. So we also spoke about major reforms over and beyond the tax reforms we are seeing. We are expecting some 3 big reforms in the area of customs tax, excise, and then income taxes. So these are areas that we have touched on this morning that I thought I should circle back. What's the next step after all that we have heard today? And the hope that this good budget brings to us, we've been informed or we've been alerted to the fact that we will not realize all these benefits if we allow our Islamic militants to enter our country and cause problems. So the burden is on you and I to stay vigilant and inform every person or everyone of any suspicion that we see, just so that we make sure our country remains safe and we are able to realize the benefits that this budget is to bring us. To end it up, I would like to say a very, very big thank you to our special guests, our distinguished guests, Honorable Setepe, for honoring this occasion. We have Mr. Akes, the Commissioner Tony, for being here this morning, and for all our business partners that have made time to sit with us throughout this session. We say a very big thank you. We will continue to engage you. We will continue to dialogue. This is not the end of our program. We will take the feedback we've gotten here and we will feed back to the Ministry of Finance, like Vish mentioned earlier on, and like I have just said, and make sure that whatever comes out, we circle that back to you. It's a privilege to have you all this morning, and we say a very, very, very big thank you for your time well spent with us and for the insights you have shared with us this morning, and for being very open and for trusting us that we will work on any comment or feedback you shared with us. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you very much, George Ahen. So George Ahen, the assurance leader at PwC. And I want to just quickly say a big thank you to all those who joined us online on TV, Joy News, Joy Socials, Graphic, Online TV, Graphic, our media partners, and also the link that we shared to our clients as well. Thank you so much, and for all those questions that you asked. We have come to the end of the program, but what we are going to do quickly, obviously for records, is that we're going to take pictures. I only have 2 categories. The first one is an invitation to all PwC partners to come up front. The photographers, please direct this, and then the panelists will just join them